Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could be changing the college football landscape in the very near future. So today we are back with the full 10 predictions as opposed to those fives I used to be doing, kind of splitting the episode up. This will be entirely predictions for the week ahead, that being week 7. So if you want to hear about them, and those include games like Penn State, Michigan, and Tennessee, Alabama, and all that good stuff, go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Plus, if there are any of these that you disagree with, make sure you leave them in the comments, or any more games you've got predictions for. I'd love to hear them. But let's go ahead and start off. I don't want to waste any time with this one because I know that a lot of the people who may find this video, you never know who's going to find it or who won't, but a lot of the people who are likely going to find this video is the Tennessee versus Alabama crowd. So I'm going to put it off the very top just to make it easier on everybody. And I hate doing it. I hate saying that Alabama could lose because I've been too bad for them for the entire season. Even after the Texas game, in my thoughts, I was pretty at bat for them against the A&M game. But at the end of the day, I think Tennessee is going to go in there and beat Alabama. Granted, it is in Tennessee, but I think that they've got the momentum. I think they've got the talent. I think they've got what you need right now. And I just think Alabama is lacking that certain quality that we typically expect from the Crimson Tide. Alabama, going back just what I was talking about with that A&M game, I would be lying if I said they looked great. They didn't look just awful. A&M's still a decent enough team to where whenever you go into deep waters with them, you understand it because they have a lot of talented players. But a team that is supposed to be the top of the country, or at least good enough to be in the college football playoffs, you probably don't see that very often, that they go into that level of competition against an A&M team. And yes, I understand that Bryce Young was out, but if Bryce Young is not fully healthy for this game, which he almost can't be, or if they roll out Milroe or Ty Simpson or whoever it's going to be, I think that Tennessee wins it, and I don't want to say comfortably, but I think it doesn't leave much up to speculation as to should they have won that game, it being super close, would things have changed this way or that way. I think they go in there and they make a statement win. When you look at Tennessee's season as a whole, everything's just kind of come together, and they finally starting to figure it out. And Heupel looks good. Hendon Hooker looks good. Their rush defense is very, very good. They're I believe 11th in the country in yards allowed on the ground per game or something absurd like that. It's all forming together to where you have a strong enough base on defense, and while no, they're not going to be stopping any Bryce Youngs from throwing all over the yard, they can certainly stop Jahmyr Gibbs if that's who they have to rely on, or maybe not stop him, but contain him to being less of a dominant playmaker as he usually is. Just overall, I think Rocky Top is going to be an electric place to be on Saturday, and I think Tennessee might just get it done, and then we see what happens moving forward, because realistically they would have to beat Georgia and presumably Alabama again in the SEC championship. I'm not very confident on those two games. I think if Alabama is closer to full health, especially in the quarterback position, they probably beat them. But this week, I think they get it done. Another team that I don't want to say has taken people by surprise. I do think Tennessee has been a very surprising outcome for a lot of people. Not me. I called them being 9th or 10th in the AP poll once the year ends at the very beginning of the season. But somebody who I do think has snuck up on a lot of people is Penn State, and they've got a big game coming up against Michigan. I'm once again going for the technical underdog as far as rankings and where they finish on the poll. I'm taking Penn State in this game to go out there and beat Michigan. This one will be primarily based on the fact that Penn State's defense is so good, and Michigan, while they have done very well for themselves on offense, I don't think that they've played all that great of teams, and Penn State will go out there and pose a real problem. I don't think that they're going to stop either one of McCarthy or Blake Corum, but I think that they can contain them and maybe push one of them into their worst game of the season and another one pretty close to that mark. They just got that kind of pressure right now. Like, for example, 5th fewest rush yards allowed per game right now. They're top 5 in the country, and they force 2.4 turnovers a game. They go out there, they get the ball, you make mistakes, and McCarthy's a young enough guy, and their strength being in the ground as it is, I think that that's a real recipe for disaster for the Wolverines coming up on Saturday. Plus, I'd like to argue that a lot of people are making a big deal out of it being in the Big House, but I would take their experience going to Auburn and being in an SEC environment as more difficult to get through than the Big House is going to be at noon or 11 a.m. I guess at their time. I don't think that you're getting enough of the atmosphere. It's not whenever everything's dark and people are really out there and really chaotic. I think it's too early in the day to really say it's on that same level as Alabama or Auburn rather. So I think that they've already gotten one of the hardest environments they're going to play in out of the way, and I think it's made them seasoned and really tough to what they're going to experience in the Big House. The next teams I want to talk about is OU and Kansas. Both teams have absolutely had the bubble popped around them, if you will. Something gave with Kansas. They lost a very good TCU team. It wasn't the TCU team of last year or something like that. OU has been kicked repeatedly and are now on a very bad tear. While I don't think OU is back or is going to rally back and be some incredible team, I think they probably finished around 7 wins. I do think that they get to number 4 and beat Kansas this week. The Jayhawks starting quarterback, Jalen Daniels, he is out now, and their backup, while he did look all right, I think a lot of that was surprise factor, and now he's got tape on him. You don't really have that surprise. You know who's coming in there under center against you. OU, while their defense has not been able to stop anybody, they will at least know a little bit more about what their opposition is, and I think, again, Kansas was riding a real strength and a real wave of momentum coming throughout the season. And now that they've lost to TCU, I can absolutely see where the bubble's been burst and some things could be a real fear moving forward with them. I don't think that they have the talent that OU has. Actually, in fact, I know they don't. OU consistently gets these high-level recruits that Kansas does not. Pure talent, OU wins this game 10 times out of 10. While I think it's going to be a close game, I don't think OU is going to knock the doors off of them or anything. OU and Venables are playing for their jobs, whether that be at OU, whether that be in the transfer portal. Venables, obviously, it would be between being a head coach at Oklahoma or having to go back to the defensive coordinator ranks. But Kansas right now, they're just playing to boost an already shocking year. They've done an incredible job to get where they are and to have done what they did. But now that some of that mystique is gone and now that they have lost, I think OU gets back on track a little bit and capitalizes on some of that momentum loss that the Jayhawks have. The next game I want to look at, speaking of momentum lost, we've got two teams that I thought were going to be much better than they are, that are kind of crawling their way back into this game. BYU, who has struggled a little bit. Notre Dame was not the best showing for them. And Arkansas, who, the last little bit has just been an embarrassment, against Texas A&M. And then obviously you expected a loss to Alabama, but that Mississippi State game was the worst of them all. And I would argue Mississippi State is the second best team on that list of 3. I think BYU, looking at how Arkansas has done defensively, more specifically in the secondary, I think BYU has the pieces to get this one done. Jaron Hall is a very good quarterback. Worst quarterbacks have done very, very good against Arkansas. I think Jaron Hall is, while he has not had just the best games of his career lately, I think he's a very good quarterback, and whenever he goes up against a secondary like Arkansas's, I think he's going to get that job done. And, to kind of retrack on something I'd mentioned earlier, very similar to the Bama situation, while I know KJ's injury is a head injury, and usually that's either, you're concussed or you're not, I don't think that he'll be fully prepared. I don't know that he'll be fully in this game if he does come back, and he certainly can't be the same as far as practicing and staying in full shape. It's like he's had a bye week there, but without any training. I don't think it's particularly inspiring for his first game back. And then you look at the guys behind him, he's absolutely better than those, even, being unprepared and having to deal with what he's dealt with, because Malik Hornsby and Cade Fortin have looked bad. It has been a real sticky situation for Arkansas's quarterback room. If KJ leaves this year or, whatever happens, I wouldn't be shocked if they visit the transfer portal, because what they see, what I've seen on the field from Hornsby and Fortin, that's not enough to keep you powered up and keep you rolling the SEC. BYU has a solid enough defense and enough pieces up front, definitely enough pieces on offense. I think they get this one done, and you have the home field advantage. That certainly helps out a little bit as well. I think both teams have really struggled, and to see Arkansas go out there and drop another one would be pretty shocking, especially how they started the season. But I think it's coming. I really do. So the next team I want to look at is somebody who has kind of dug their way out of the pit in Nebraska. They play Purdue this week, and the Mickey Joseph era has been fruitful. It's been, just about everything you could have hoped for as Nebraska, and they're finally starting to look like the team that I thought they were coming into the year. I think they continue and get to a third win in a row in the Mickey Joseph era with a win here versus Purdue. Purdue, as a whole, typically they look like the Aiden O'Connell show. More often than they don't, at least. They love to let him sling the ball around, and I don't just love a lot of the pieces beyond him. They've got a good receiver, but, it doesn't just scream super tough team. But surprisingly enough, when you look at their schedule, the only games that they've lost are against quality teams. You've got Penn State, and you've got Syracuse on there. And I don't like saying Syracuse is a quality team, but at this point, they're making me. It's not a negotiable thing. They are a quality team and a very quality opponent, to say the least. Nebraska took 3 interceptions versus Rutgers. They've got bad stats as far as pass defense goes, but they took 3 interceptions from Rutgers. They held Indiana and Connor Bazelak to 50% completion. So they're improving. They're making these leaps and the jumps and stepping up a little bit more where they need to. And overall, I think the improvements on that side of the ball with Casey Thompson and Anthony Grant's offensive skills are going to be enough to get this one done. This is another one of those that I don't see being particularly wide. I think it'll probably finish within a score and a half, that 5 to 8, 9 point margin. But I do think Nebraska comes out on top, and they just keep rolling. And at some point, it's going to get really hard to tell Mickey Joseph no whenever he asks for this job full time. The next one I want to look at, we're going to make our trip out to the Pac-12 now. We've got a huge matchup, one that could absolutely end one team's hopes at a championship with the Utah Utes, and by championship I do mean the Pac-12 championship. They're going up against USC, who has been dominant to this point in the year, but I think that need to win right now is just enough for Utah to pull one out, and obviously you have that home field advantage, which helps a little bit, but I think that they can't afford to lose in this spot where USC, they can absolutely afford to lose. For one, they have the media attention and they have that backing because they're such a big brand. They could make the college football playoffs with one loss. But again, Utah, they just lost to UCLA. They know what that defense is like going up against a quality offense like UCLA has. I think that they managed to stick in this one, and they managed to just barely keep their Pac-12 championship hopes alive. Whenever you get into what's going to need to be done for this game to work out well for Utah, you do have to look at the defense. Utah's defense has to make USC uncomfortable. They have to make sure that their offense can't just click, and that Jordan Addison and Mario Williams and Caleb Williams and all these guys can't just be clicking constantly. You've got to find a disruptor. Travis Dye, running back. You've got to find some way to earn that edge over them, because you have enough offensive pieces in Cam Rising and Tavion Thomas that should be able to help out a little bit, but it really does lie in the defense right now. You've got to make sure that one of the country's best offenses is not comfortable and is not fully at their best, which obviously very hard thing to do, but Utah has to do it now. In order for their season to be saved and for them to not have to go to some little bowl and, kind of one that nobody really has any interest in, they've got to start fighting. They've got to start fighting fast. I think they fight their way to a win against USC. The next team I want to talk about, we go back to the Big 12 now. We're moving our way closer to the east side of the country. Oklahoma State's been a team that I've been a fan of, kind of, more. I knew that they were going to be pretty solid coming into the year. I had them in my college football playoffs, which maybe is influencing this a little bit, but I think they escaped TCU and managed to keep the 0 by their name for what will end up being probably their first loss of the season next week against Texas. So obviously Max Duggan, I said Duggan I believe on a previous episode, it's Dugan if I'm not mistaken. He is their biggest challenge they've faced to this point under center. He is very, very good, and he's playing some incredible ball. You can't deny that. But TCU has become a scary team, and it's kind of making Oklahoma State become overlooked, which I find weird because they are so high up in the polls, but, the media and just general fans are overlooking them because you have all these new shiny toys in the Big 12, like your Kansases and your TCUs and your whatnots. that have kind of risen up and been like, wait a minute, we're here, we're cool to watch, whatever. So it's making the Cowboys kind of be put on the back burner, which is never a good thing whenever you have a team as talented as this and a team that's as well coached as this. I've gone on the record, I think Mike Gundy is a very good coach, and while I don't think Sonny Dykes is quite on that level, I do think he brings a formidable opponent to be on the other sideline from Gundy. So overall, I do think it's going to be a war. I don't know that I can qualify this as an upset, Oklahoma State avoiding an upset. I don't really know that fits the bill. But again, they've got to win this one if they want to have any level of support and real confidence going into Texas, because Texas is on a tear right now. That's not a team you really want to mess with, and you've got to make sure that you're fully prepared and that you're ready to go in there, even through all these battles that you've had to face so far. And I think that TCU represents their biggest hurdle ahead of what could be a mountain a little bit too big to climb next week. So the next one I want to talk about, we're going to make a trip to the Sun Belt, actually. I want to have some fun with this because two undefeated teams currently reside out there, both James Madison University and Coastal Carolina, still have zeros next to their name. I think one of those is getting dropped this week. I'm not being specific as to who, because I like both of their opponents. I think both of their opponents could bring some heat there. If I had to lean one way, it'd probably be JMU, but I think one of them will fall this weekend. I mentioned their opponents. We might as well talk about them, right? Coastal is playing 2-3 Old Dominion. This could easily be a look-ahead spot. I think Old Dominion's a decent enough team to probably hang in there if things go a little sideways for Coastal. Plus, they just qualified for bowl game status. They're, a little bit maybe in their own heads and kind of comfortable, which being comfortable in football is never where you want to be. And then you look on the other side of it, you've got JMU, who's playing Georgia Southern. They're 3-3 currently, and they hung in against Coastal. They look like a solid enough team right now to me that I can understand there being a potential upset between these two schools. I think that one's a look-ahead spot. I don't think JMU's really in a position to look ahead at anybody. I think a lot of it will be confidence, but I like Georgia Southern right now, just how they are performing. So I'm going to say that one of those two falls sooner, in this next week. So the last one I will look at before we hit the crushed segment, who I think will crush somebody else, has to be a line within 10. But before we get to that, I don't think this will be a crushing, but I do think it will be fairly convincing. I have Clemson winning their game because I think they're tired of playing the top, the guys right below them, I guess, in the ACC. I think they're tired of playing them super close. I think they're going to go out there against Florida State and really just give them the business. The Tigers' front seven is absurd. Their defense looks very, very good, and Florida State was struggling against North Carolina State, which they don't have a bad defense, but whenever their offense can't do anything because Devin Leary goes out, you've got to be able to turn something there, and they just couldn't. They kind of fell apart there and never really capitalized on their opportunities. Clemson won't even give them as many opportunities as they had against North Carolina State. Their defense is just going to go in there and wreak havoc. The Tigers' offense also far better than it was a year ago. When you look at it, we had questions about DJ Uiagalelei coming into the season. We wondered if Cade Klubnik would need to come in and what the situation was going to be there. You don't really have those questions anymore because the Tiger offense has taken a big jump up. And then finally, again, I think they're just so tired of playing those prominent challengers in the ACC, but they're supposed to be that much better than them. They got taken pretty close against Wake Forest. They got taken pretty close against, I'm forgetting who it was right after that. But it was, these games, well, it was NC State. It was NC State. They're tired of having to go and fight tooth and nail to get these wins. I think they need a real establisher. I think they get it this week. So the last one, the who crushes who this week. I've got Baylor crushing West Virginia. This line's only at 3.5, which surprises me because Baylor's a good team. And West Virginia, I don't really think is in love with their current head coach. I think if they had the option, Neil Brown would probably be removed. Obviously if he has a strong season, it's not really much of an option, but I think that they don't really want him around at this point. And I think Baylor really has something to prove, especially now that they have their full rest coming off of a bye week and was a week prior that they lost to Oklahoma State. They've got to do some catching up in the conference. A lot of teams have passed them at this point, at least in the standings. So I think they go out there, they really make a statement, and they make sure to kind of put a big dent in where the Mountaineer season has gone to this point. So like I asked at the very beginning of the video, what do you think about these predictions? If you have any more, if you have any objections, if you like some of them, be sure to let me know in the comments section below. But that is episode 40 of the From My Perspective podcast, and as always, I'll see you next time.